Welcome to Diversity Matters. This program is designed to highlight the diversity-related activities throughout New Hanover County Schools and the greater Wilmington region. I'm Velita Quattlebaum, Chief Communications Officer for New Hanover County Schools. This month, we're recognizing and celebrating Black History Month. Today, we're delighted to welcome Mrs. Bertha B. Todd, a retired educator, community activist, and author. We also welcome Dr. Jan Davidson of the Cape Fear Museum, she's the historian, and Heather Yenko, the Cape Fear Museum curator. We will have a thought-provoking and educational show today that hopefully will inspire all of us to learn more about Black history here in Wilmington and get involved in community efforts to raise awareness. This is going to be a history-provoking edition of Diversity Matters, and I can't wait to hear from our exciting panel of guests. So don't go away. We'll be right back after a short break.
Get connected with your school system. Your School News covers news that matters for parents, guardians, and greater New Hanover County. Stories about preparing students for success in a changing world. Stories where students are achievers.
Internship, we pretty much made a vehicle from spare parts, and at first we made it so it just moved, and then we made it so it was an electrical vehicle.
Stories of teaching where every child yearns to learn.
Today is all about STEAM. STEAM is kind of the key word to tying art into science, technology, engineering, and math.
Your School News brings viewers more than 8 hours of school news and information, reporting on what's happening in the district, what students are learning, how the school system operates, and beyond. Your School News, only on this channel.
Welcome back to Diversity Matters. I'm Velita Quattlebaum. This month we're recognizing and celebrating Black History Month. And my first guest is my good friend, Mrs. Bertha Todd, a retired educator. Ms. Todd, thank you for being here. I'm going to call you Bertha. I know that's important to you.
Thank you.
And can you start off, tell us a little bit about your background and your connection to New Hanover County Schools?
Well, that will be interesting. I had parents who were educators. My father was a principal of a comprehensive high school, and my mother was a third grade elementary school teacher. The two of them met at Federal State Normal. Can you believe that?
No.
Well, they got married. One was from Duplin County, and the other was from Sampson County. I had an elder brother who became a principal in Sampson County, and I had an elder sister who majored in English and French and retired as an instructor at Cape Fear Community College. It wasn't called Cape Fear Community College then. Then I had a twin sister who was a retired emeritus from A&T State University. She was also a clinical psychologist, and she was a perpetual school student. She earned 2 doctorates and 3 masters, and she was also a clinical psychologist. So I was, both of us were in school at the same time. We majored in science. I think we thought we were going to be doctors, had no money. This was a 5th year. Our brother and sister had been to school and graduated. So we were told, or not suggested, told to take some education courses, which we did. Then we remained at the school, North Carolina Central University, for another year to get a master's degree in library science. We spent 5.5 years at this college, university now. And after graduation, I came straight to Wilmington. I signed a contract during that summer. And I was more interested in working with junior high school students, junior college students, but I ended up being in high school and a bit of junior college. I came straight to Wilmington and remained here for 39 years.
And you were at Williston?
I came to Williston. I set up Williston Senior High School Library.
Excellent.
And remained there for 15 years. It was my goal to inspire students to enjoy reading. And I enjoyed reading when we were growing up. And our mother would give us books, all the time for Christmas. We'd get a few toys, but mostly we had books. And our older sister read for us. We were about 4 years old then. And she stopped in the middle of a story, a Christmas story, and wouldn't read anymore until we gave her some of our candy. So that's when we really learned to read, at the age of 5. And we went to school at the age of 5 because we read so well.
Right. Now let me ask you, Williston and Willistonians are world famous, and they've gone on to do great things in the world. And so you were the librarian. So I want to know how you used your role to make such an impact with those students.
I taught library lessons, how to use the library effectively. And I did that for all of the English teachers, English classes. This, I think, helped them to be invited upon graduation to the Ivy League schools. They knew how to use the library. They didn't have to come in and say, well, how do I find this or how do I find that? And then I also sponsored the first countywide book fair in New Hanover County. To me, that was an accomplishment, but we'll talk about that a little later.
Okay. Now, so since we're on the topic of books, I understand that you have authored 3 books and participated in others. Can you tell me about those?
Yes, one of the books is My Restless Journey, my memoirs, so to speak. This other one was a really response to Catherine Stockett's The Help.
The Help, and yours is called Meet the Help.
Meet the Help.
Right.
And really, I think I was inspired. I had an epiphany, and I said, after I'd read her book, I said, I was the help. I was the help when I was in college.
What did you do? People don't know that. They know this great community activists and educators, but you were the help? Tell us about that.
Yes, and by the way, I consider myself a strategist. I don't consider myself an activist. I do strategize quite a bit. But when my twin sister and I were in college the junior year, we decided to go to Virginia Beach to work. We really got in touch with the employment agency to find us jobs. Well, I tell you, I really helped to make the employment agency rich. I had 4 jobs in one summer. And I didn't make that much money, but I learned a wealth of information. So this is why I say that true stories of domestics. And the first chapter in here, I was the help. And I could relate to some of those things that Catherine Stockett wrote, not all of them.
Okay, so you were a strategist in Wilmington, educator, and so then you became involved with the 1898 Commission. Can you tell us about that commission?
Yes.
And what you were able to accomplish with that?
I continue to admire that small group of individuals, community strategists, university professors, people like me who had retired, who worked for 13 years in order to commemorate 100 years of this violence and massacre that occurred in 1898.
Can you briefly tell my audience about the massacre? Because there are people today who still are not aware of what happened right here in Wilmington.
I really can. It was the only successful coup d'etat in the United States. You know that.
Yes.
I really cannot go into too much detail, but quite a bit of this massacre of violence, as many call it, had to do with voting. There were 3 political parties at that time. The Republicans at that time, mostly black and some white sympathizers. The Populists, who were the wheat farmers and less than wealthy whites. And the Democrats, who were mostly the wealthy whites. And when the Populists and the Republicans determined that they could beat the political system by fusing together and voting for each other, then they managed to wrestle most of the elected offices from the wealthy white Democrats.
Okay.
And this occurred, but there was also scare tactics, militia, red shirts, all of those individuals who worked for years, 2 years, to make certain that the populists and the Republicans were afraid to vote, and they didn't go to the polls, and the wealthy white Democrats won the elected offices again.
Okay. So now let's talk about 1898 Commission again. What goals do you feel that the Commission accomplished?
Well, let's separate the commission from the 1898 Memorial Foundation.
Okay.
The commission was only mandated by the North Carolina legislators once we had completed almost 13 years of work towards the advancement of 1898 Memorial Foundation. Mm-hmm. I was invited to be on that commission, but I refused because I was really tired after 13 years of working with this.
Right, 13 years would make one tired.
Yes, but the commission they worked with LeRae Umfleet, who did the study mandated by the legislators of the residual effects of 1898 citizens in southeastern North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And from that, LeRae has written a book, which I found very interesting, and the commission was formed to study the local area.
Now, one thing I find fascinating is that that whole era is not talked about, is not taught in North Carolina history in the curriculum. Why is that?
Justice moves very slowly. There are some North Carolina resource books now because I've used them when I've talked with the students at Virgo Middle School.
I know you taught some of our students at Isaac Bear about it as
yes,
well. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I have several copies. And would you believe there's an author in New York who wrote about the 1898 event?
Right, I read an article about it recently.
And there's a study guide that accompanies that particular book. So there are some, but I do think there will be more and more books written about 1898.
And it seems like because of the work you and others have done, that at least now the information is available if our students want to research it.
This is correct. You can find much information at the public library. Mm-hmm. You can find much information online because I've checked it myself. And I can't tell you how gratifying it is to see that we've come this far by faith. Faith in God and faith in people.
Right. So I know you worked at Hoggard during a time when there was racial tension, and the work you've done in the church and in the community is definitely commendable. But what do you think you'd like to be remembered most for, Bertha?
As one who has profound faith in God, as one who has profound faith in humanity, as one who has perseverance, and as one who likes to see justice realized.
And like you said, justice is slow. It's
Yes,
a slow
it is.
process.
Yes.
One last question I'd like to get in with you. What do you think we need to be doing now as a community, and what are some of the most dire challenges that we still face?
The opioid crisis. We must realize that our young folk who may be addicted now will be our leaders for tomorrow if they're still living. So I think that each of us must build the type of environment that will support our youth in developing and gaining their self-esteem and self-confidence. And we must see or make certain that these young folk have support groups.
Right.
And if one has self-esteem and self-confidence, I think the person is less likely to become addicted. I'm not a psychologist. My twin sister was a clinical psychologist. She passed in 2016. But I do believe that. And I think the next thing is ethnic groups. I don't call races anymore. I don't consider races. We all are members of the human race. And the reason I say that even more, I had my DNA examined, and would you believe that I am 7% Irish.
I believe it, Bertha.
No, I don't. No, I don't. I was as shocked as I could be. And I think if we realize that we all are one, we are members of the human race, and we unify
Right.
to make certain that we help our youth, that we face the issues, and that we try to correct the issues.
And reach across.
And reach across
To
lines.
each other, exactly.
Develop a relationship with someone else who is not like you.
Right. Just that small act can really make a difference.
Yes, it can.
And I thank you so much. And I love you and I can talk to you forever. But
I know, I could talk forever too. I think that what we all must realize as we continue and move forward on life's journey, we must realize that we all are one. We all are a member of the human race. Then we can unify and face the challenges before us.
right. Face the challenges together. You're absolutely right. It's always great to hear from community members like Bertha Todd who've actually done exciting and wonderful things for our community. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Jan Davidson and Heather Yanko of the Cape Fear Museum. They are here with some very interesting artifacts and interesting stories about the roles that African Americans played in the growth of Wilmington and the Cape Fear region. Please stay tuned for more of Diversity Matters.
Start your day with New Hanover County Schools, The Morning Show. This Rise and Shine program will put a smile on your face and a spring in your step. Best of all, you'll start the day a little smarter. The Morning Show features an exciting 6-hour mix of exclusive features, cooking, entertainment, news, science, math, and more. New Hanover County Schools, The Morning Show, educating all viewers to achieve today and tomorrow in a global community. Only on this channel.
Dr. Davidson and Ms. Yanko, welcome to Diversity Matters, and thank you for being our featured guest today.
Thank you for having us.
So I'm very excited about the artifacts that you brought to share with us. And you're the historian of the Cape Fear Museum. And Ms. Yanko, you're the curator.
Yes, that's correct.
So I would like for you all to talk to us about the things that you brought and how it relates to Black history here in Wilmington.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you. So over here we have some copies of the Daily Record, and like Ms. Todd was talking about, the Daily Record is connected to 1898. Alexander Manley was the editor of the newspaper. It was an African-American newspaper here in town. It was the only daily in the whole of North Carolina. And we have 4 very rare editions of that that come from 1898.
And that's the actual paper.
That's the actual newspaper that survived. They're very rare because paper's hard to keep a hold of over the years. So this one is especially interesting because it's from October 20th, 1898, just a few short weeks before the African American vote is suppressed here, and then the white supremacy campaign instigates violence on the streets of Wilmington. So Mr. Manley is encouraging African American residents to register for the vote if they haven't, to go out and vote even though people are trying to intimidate them. And also he's talking about how there are red shirts, which are kind of a paramilitary group on the streets, but really nobody is going to want to have violence happen here because it's not good for any part of the community. So that's one of these things that you read those original words and it puts a shiver up your spine.
It does, it gives you chills. Because he was trying to calm people down.
He was trying to calm people down. He was trying to say this is not going to happen, and unfortunately he was wrong, and this is one of the most critical moments in African American history in our region is the coup d'etat of 1898 and the violence that wrecked our streets that then ended up with white supremacist Democrats in charge of the state, the county, and the state for the next 60 years.
And that's one of the first things they did was burn down his paper, right?
They burnt his newspaper office. And so after that year, laws were passed to segregate the races, and Jim Crow really becomes a fact of life in our city, and black men who had gained the vote after emancipation really lose that vote. And so it really is a transformative moment, a terrible moment in our history, and we have these incredible artifacts that relate to that.
Wow, it's amazing to me that one of the most major things that happened in Black history happened here in Wilmington, North Carolina, and yet it's not widely known.
And Wilmington was the largest city in North Carolina from the 1830s up through the 20th century, early 20th century, and it was also a place of a lot of opportunity for African Americans after emancipation. Men and women and children here went out and learned how to read and write. They set up their own businesses, they set up schools, they set up churches, and so there was this thriving, vibrant community. And that's actually, historians really think that's partly why it happened here, because the kind of line is, if they could do it to Wilmington, they could do it anywhere. And so it really was, if a place with a Black majority and men of political power and economic wealth and worth could be, suppressed, then that was something that would send a message to the rest of North Carolina, and it really did.
Oh my, that is very tragic. Okay, well, let's move on to another great part of Wilmington's history was Williston Senior High School, and you have some artifacts from there, and that's the connection that we have with Mrs. Todd from the first segment.
Yes, and so we brought a few yearbooks as well as a trophy, and Miss Todd was the librarian, and she actually donated this yearbook as well as some others to us at the museum, and this one is from 1968, which is the last year that Williston was open as a senior high school. So it was the high school for everybody who was African American in the county for 45 years. The first graduates were 1923, the last ones were 1968. So there was a school there before, but they didn't have the high school. So if you were a person of color in this community, Williston was where you went. And Williston was an amazing school, despite the fact that it was a segregated school. The teachers are talked about as if they walked on water.
And they did.
And actually, because of the lack of opportunities in some ways, you had amazing teachers, because people who might have gone off to be an engineer or aerosmith, some fancy scientist, whatever, they maybe didn't have those opportunities, so they came home and they became educators. So we have some incredible educators in our Williston, and we have a lot of material and a room at Cape Fear Museum, the Williston Auditorium, that honors this legacy.
I think every one of our students should go and see that, because I've seen museums do exhibits in the past about what happened to those African American schools and all the trophies and all the medals and things like that that were just destroyed.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have developed a relationship with the Williston Alumni Organization, that they've supported us and they meet at our museum, which is always great to see. But we also have managed to collect some really key pieces of that history.
And you have a trophy?
It's a trophy from the Sam Pugh. He won a drafting trophy in 1961. And again, it sort of reflects the fact that there's a range of skills that you learned when you were at Williston, and there were so many children of achievement who came out of that and then went on to go to great colleges and do some wonderful things for our community.
Absolutely. And what about this tennis racket?
So this tennis racket was owned by Althea Gibson. She was the first African-American woman to win Wimbledon. She played in 1957. She won singles and doubles, and she donated this to WHQR for a fundraiser, who then ended up donating it to us in the 1980s. And the Harry C. Lee Company sponsored Althea when she was starting out. She did spend time here in Wilmington training to be in tennis, and after she gained some success, she was a spokeswoman for this company. So.
Oh, that's interesting. And it's great that that company sponsored her at the time.
And she's a Willistonian too. She graduated in 1949.
Oh, did she?
Yeah.
Okay, I knew she came here to visit Dr. Eaton, but I didn't know she went to Williston.
Yeah, he mentored her and brought her here to get her to go through school and finish up, and then so she could go to college, and they were grooming her to break that color barrier in tennis.
And she did. Right. She was like Serena Williams is now.
Yes,
A tennis
exactly.
player.
Yes,
Right.
yes, she was.
I say that so my students that watch will know who she was and how important she was to our history. And then we have a quilt.
We do. We have a quilt that was made by Mrs. Ida Mosley. She owned a seamstress shop on North 6th Street, and this was made from fabric from dresses out of her shop. And it was donated to the museum by her 2 daughters, Margaret and Augusta Mosley, and Jan can expand on the Mosley family.
So Ida was married to Levi Mosley. They lived on the north side of town, and Mr. Mosley had been born in slavery, and then he worked at the cotton compress. He owned his own grocery store on the north side of town, and really their story is a wonderful story of the ways that people carved up opportunity out over generations, because Augusta is the first woman who ran for city council in Wilmington, African-American woman who ran for city council, I should say. She's a graduate of Howard. She was a social worker here for the county for 30 plus years. Wow. A wonderful woman whose life and was shaped by the work that her parents did to raise themselves up after emancipation and during the late 19th century.
Do you remember what year she ran for city council?
It was 1968 or 9, and there was a runoff, and she almost won. She lost like 12 votes.
Wow.
But we have pictures of her. We have a flyer of her race from that, and we actually have suits that her mother Ida made for her to wear to work. So we have this wonderful family collection connected to Mr. and Mrs. Mosley and their children.
Excellent. I hope everyone goes to visit, and I will certainly encourage some of our students to come to visit to see all these great things. Thank you all so much for being here. And I want to thank Mrs. Todd and all of my guests today for this very, very interesting and informative show about Wilmington's history and Black history in particular. New Hanover County Schools values diversity in all facets of the district, and diversity is the very reason why this show exists. So viewers, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Diversity Matters. Feel free to call the Public Relations Division at 910-254-4245. If you have story ideas or you have questions, we would love to hear from you. Thanks so much, and I'll see you again on Diversity Matters.